Hi, I'm Suzanne Siracuse. Welcome to season 2 of my podcast focused on the future, keys to building a profitable, sustainable, and impactful business. And I'm excited to be partnering with wealthmanagement.com on this. This series will focus on what firms need to embrace to ensure their growth and success for the future. And you'll hear from industry leaders and advisors on what is working for them. I have a great lineup of guests in store, and today I'm talking with Brian Hamburger. Brian is the founder, president, and CEO of MarketCounsel Consulting, the leading business and regulatory compliance consultancy to the country's preeminent entrepreneurial independent investment advisors. Brian is also the founder and chief counsel of the Hamburger Law Firm, a boutique law firm with its practice in virtually all areas related to investment and securities industry, entrepreneurial, and employment matters. He is also a frequent and popular industry speaker and columnist. So welcome, Brian. Thanks so much for being my guest. I really can't wait to talk with you today.
I've been waiting for so long for you to invite me onto this podcast. I'm honored to be here, Suzanne.
Good things come to those who wait. I am so excited to talk with you, and I know we're going to have some fun today too. So we normally start the podcast with the same question to every guest. And I love not really knowing the answer to it before we get started. And I really don't know the answer to this question for you either, even though we've known each other for decades. Tell me and tell us, our listeners, a little bit about your journey in working specifically within the wealth management ecosystem with RIA firms, broker dealers, investment advisors, et cetera. How did you get to where you are today?
I'll tell you, that's a big place to start, right? Because how far back do you want to go? Especially as you and I have grown up in the space, right? That was an easier question to answer if you would have asked me, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. A little more challenging today. But I grew up around the wealth management space. My father made his way to be an investment advisor,
Oh,
and so I got to know his friends, right? I got to know people around him, and I heard their struggles because not only were they investment advisors, but they were in the independent space and dealing with a lot of the struggles that entrepreneurs deal with, right? They are super sophisticated at financial affairs and helping people plan for their finances and evaluating the securities and assessing risk, but not so much with their own business affairs, right? And so it struck me pretty early on that his study group and his network of colleagues in the space, it struck me that they were frustrated at the complexities in which they had to deal with and navigate through. But it also struck me that they were just frustrated without really an outlet, that they really couldn't articulate the questions to ask. And so, I really took a keen interest in that very, very early on. My grandmother encouraged me to not stop my education after undergrad. She shamed me into going to law school, and and coming out of law school, I didn't have much of an interest in joining a big firm, although I tried it because I didn't know what I didn't know, not having any lawyers in the family. But then a few years after law school, kind of foolishly, just said I could do this and started both MarketCounsel Consulting and the Hamburger Law Firm in August of 2000, so 24 years ago, just last week. And so it was really exciting. Right from the very beginning, we really set out with a charge. I say we, it was me and an assistant from my law firm. It wasn't like a big team. We set out with a charge of, hey, let's do it differently, right? Instead of running a call center and answering people's questions, let's spend time with them, right, and really understand what their needs, goals, and objectives are, just like advisors do with their clients. And let's create a chassis where we can dispense objective advice and not one that's based upon selling them stuff. And let's create something that's comfortable, right? Where advisors can fall into the role of clients and feel safe in asking, what some may say are stupid questions. But but they need that safe space in order to be heard and for someone to align themselves with really their interests. And then finally it was like, let's focus on solutions and let's hear what they think their problem is, but let's be bold enough or have enough swagger to say, I hear what you're saying. However, what we really want to solve for is something a little bit different than that, and really help provide something of more sustainable value than just answering their questions. And so over the last 24 years, it has been quite a journey. It's probably a longer answer than you were looking for, and with all the undulations of running, my own small business. But here we sit today, MarketCounsel Consulting, the Hamburger Law Firm, and MarketCounsel Productions are three front-facing companies, and it's really an honor to continue to run these companies alongside some really talented men and women who support the brand.
So first of all, I didn't know that. I didn't know your father was in the business. I should have, I guess. But let me ask you, so I have some follow-up questions. So your father was a financial advisor. Was he with like a large brokerage firm, or did you say he was independent?
So he made his way to the industry, right? There's a few common paths to the industry.
Mm-hmm.
He made his way into the industry as from a factory manager to someone who was selling insurance, right? And he went from insurance to financial planning, from financial planning to independent registered rep, and from independent registered rep to focusing on the RIA along with maintaining his licenses with an independent broker dealer.
Got it. Okay, so that's so interesting. So you really have a bird's eye view from growing up and talking with your dad and your dad's friends, and noticed what they were struggling with, and then applied that to, your grandmother's influence of going to law school. I love that. And the fact that, did you launch MarketCounsel Consulting and Hamburger Law Firm at the same time?
The exact same day, August 1st of 2000. Yeah, exactly. So our business model hasn't materially changed, but another kind of fun fact that I think will resonate, maybe only with you and not to any of listeners of this podcast, is that I I owe a huge debt of gratitude to mentors that I've had along the way, and among them is a common friend of ours. But the president and CEO of my father's broker dealer was a gentleman by the name of Mark Goldberg, who, as we sit on the board of Invest in Others, and get a chance to work with Mark, call him a colleague and a friend, and so this is a really small town, right? This independent wealth management space, and
Yeah.
it's if you do right by people early on and you honor the relationship by doing your best, those relationships really stand the test of time.
I did not even realize that. That's so funny. Yeah. So Mark was ran Royal Alliance for a long time. And yes, personal friend as well as business acquaintance. And so that's really fascinating. Also too, I recently had Liz Nesvold on the podcast, and we were talking about how she became a specialist in the investment banking area around RIAs and wealth management before it was a thing. And same with you. You really became a specialist in this area in 2004. There was starting to be this movement to independence, but it was really like, again, kind of seeing an opportunity and getting there like first to market. So kudos to you for doing that. That's really an interesting way to come into the industry. And
Well, listen, it's
thanks for
better.
sharing
Yeah,
that.
it's better to be lucky than good, right? So, in the right place at the right time. But I don't know how people didn't see it, right? Because at the end of the day, consumers were and still arguably are starved for objective advice, right? They are constantly looking for a trusted advisor, someone who can be on their side. And so when you look out at the solutions that are available to investors and consumers, they're really rudimentary, right? And they were built for scale. They were built, to figure out how many people can we handle, and how efficiently can we put them through the system. And so it was really ripe for disruption at the time. And because you had such a fragmented market of independent wealth managers, or would-be independent RIAs, they just didn't know where to go for advice, right? And at the time, the only thing that was out there were folks who called themselves consultants, and these regulatory consultants just essentially had products to sell. It was like, buy these policies and procedures and buy these disclosures or these form contracts, and then go to your lawyer and have them, make appropriate modifications. And it was just a terribly clunky system, right? And very, very inefficient. So I don't think it took crazy intelligence, just someone to kind of pick up the rock and say, hey, this is an area I should probably spend a little more time in.
Yeah, that's interesting. And again, like you're right, it was all the signs were pointing to kind of where the industry has gone. So
Let me tell you a
you
quick story. I'm sorry.
yes.
So I still remember back around 2000. I don't know if it was before or after I launched my firm, but I was going up these really long escalators at Penn Station. I'm sure you've been up those escalators before, right? They go up like 3 floors.
Yep.
And I was standing next to one of my first clients, who was the first president of of what preceded the CFP board, right? When the IAFP and ICFP came together, and we're going up the stairs, and I see this absolutely breathtaking woman on the front of a yacht in this billboard over these escalators, and it's talking about estate planning and wealth management and all these very lofty things. And it's an ad for a wirehouse, essentially, a company who was peddling the purchase and sale of securities at the time. And so he said to me, he said, how can they do that? Like, how can they market for something and yet sell another, right? And so it struck me really early on that consumers were just confused, right? What they really wanted, and the wirehouses knew this, what they really wanted is they wanted a trusted advisor, right? That was going to guide them to that pinnacle of their life, right? Standing on the front of a yacht. But what they were getting instead was someone who was willing to access the financial markets for them, right? And this is the time that online brokerage was just coming to be a thing. And so you realize that that wasn't going to check the box, and that there was disruption that was coming really soon. But we unfortunately haven't moved much beyond that right now, right? There's still a lot of confusion in the marketplace, but independent wealth management has come a long way since then, for sure.
Yeah, agreed. So you describe what you do at Market Counsel as working with advisors in every stage of their life cycle, everything from an advisor looking to leaving an employee-based firm and go independent, to advisors who decide to launch their own firms, to owners and advisors who are changing firms, and then those owners and advisors that wish to exit the firms eventually. You and I have seen a lot of success stories and some not so successful. So let's talk about the not so successful ones. I tend to learn more from mistakes. I don't know about you, but what are some of the biggest mistakes or missteps that you've seen in each of those stages that you serve? And of course, we won't be mentioning names, but what are some of the biggest missteps that you've seen along the way?
Wow, I'd like to say we've seen it all, but then I get into our case management meetings, and each week I'm surprised by new and novel ways to at least pursue some failure. It's really interesting. We've the stories that we've been witness to over the last quarter century could fill a book. They're fascinating, right? But they all revolve around some very central themes. The most profound one that I found is where advisors simply don't look back and attach the appropriate amount of value to their body of work throughout their whole career, right? And so as a result of that, they're willing to make very curt and flippant decisions that aren't well supported or rationalized. And and so they embark on a major pivot in their career, right? Whether it's leaving an employee-based firm, a captive employment model, to go launch their own firm, or it's bringing on new partners or capital into their firm, or it's eventually exiting their firm. They go through those moments without the benefit of forethought, treating themselves to one of one of business's ultimate luxuries, which is objective advice, going through an ardent planning process, and then really amassing the discipline or fortitude that it takes to succeed. If you read about a story in Advisor Hub, it's almost always missing one of those elements, right? It's either they didn't get the right advice, they didn't engage in a planning process, or they didn't have the discipline to execute on the plan. It's never that they were unlucky, because we can do a lot to control our own destiny through that process. And so, I find myself constantly encouraging clients to, even at a mature stage in your career, to just get comfortable with ideation, right? Just read obsessively, talk to others. And then I'm going to underline this, like, spend time with yourself, right? The fact that the headlines say that everyone's doing this or everyone's doing that doesn't mean that it's appropriate for them at that stage of their career. And so many people want to just follow the crowd, that I think that they don't honor themselves enough to say, hey, what do I want that last stage of my career to look like? The other thing is objective advice. And I say this, obviously I'm biased because we peddle objective advice, and it seems more expensive than free advice in the short term, but I can promise you it pays for itself really quickly, and several times over. It's funny, like, advisors know very well the effects of conflicts of interest, right? And their value proposition is to mitigate those conflicts and be able to be more objective with their clients. They know how to evaluate securities and investments, but they can't do this stuff for themselves, right? It's like me going to my doctor saying, well, I feel good, and him reading the chart and saying, that doesn't look so great, right? I mean,
It's
like,
a good analogy.
you need a third party to be able to be more objective in what you're saying, and ask you the questions that you would otherwise gloss over. So often we'll come to a client, and we'll get to know them. They've been in business for many years, and we'll say, well, how do you deal with this conflict of interest? And they'll say, well, it's not a conflict. We would never do that. And we'll say, well, that's not what a conflict of interest is, right? A conflict of interest is a moral problem, right? It's not a problem because you've created it. It simply is a problem that you may be incented to do one thing, and you may be a better person than that and not actually do it, but the incentive is there, right? And so we have to disclose it to clients. That's what being a fiduciary is all about. But in short, objective advice is worth its weight in gold. And then planning, right? I mean, so many people who tag themselves as financial planners don't plan their own career, right? They don't plan in their own business. And I can't underscore enough the importance of discipline and fortitude. And either you have it or you don't, right? I mean, either you're ready to double down and work at a different level than you've ever worked for the last, few decades in your career, or that's not for you. And knowing yourself, right, knowing what you're willing to put into this, is really critical, in determining, what your plan should be, what your objectives should be.
That was really, really important advice to firms, to anyone, really, anyone as they are considering a next step in their career. Just we don't take the time to be more thoughtful about the process.
No.
And I think FOMO, right? Like, oh, everybody's doing that, so I'm going to do that too. Or everybody said this was great. And realizing that you are unique, whether it's you or as an
Yeah.
advisor or your firm is unique, and your journey's unique. And so you can't say, well, it worked well for my friend Rita, but it's not going to work. So I'm going to do the same thing. So I think that's really great advice, that not attaching the correct value of their body of work, seeking out paid objective advice, as well as taking the time to really do some soul searching and then follow up with a real thoughtful planning approach. Great, great advice, Brian. I think that those are important things that anyone that's listening to this podcast needs to keep in mind. And I know on this, you're involved in a lot of behind the scenes activities in our industry, specifically relating to firms that are buying or selling. And as I mentioned, I just mentioned Liz again, Liz Nesfold she had a great statement. In fact, it became the headline for the podcast, where she said, M&A is not a business strategy. So what do you think of that statement? Do you agree with it? And if so, how should firms be thinking about their growth from both an M&A and an organic growth perspective?
Well, if you think that you're going to get me to disagree with Liz, so that, Liz is a force to be reckoned with. I know where to pick my battles, and that's not one of them. Um, Listen, she's spot on, right? In this age that we live in, where social media is plays such a dominant role, people need to remember that everything that happens to create those quote unquote Instagrammable moments happens behind the scenes, right? So yeah, we do work a lot behind the scenes because there's a story that you want to curate, and it takes time, right, to create the story. It takes planning, takes forethought. And those behind the scenes are early morning calls. They're late night Zoom calls with the team. They're checking in with your family. They're taking taking calls from the outfield of your daughter's softball game. I mean, it's that like that's what goes into all of this stuff. None of those belong on social media, right? I mean, like that's this is what we do behind the scenes. There's been something that's happened over the last few years, and it's terribly concerning to me to lend credibility to Liz's point. People come to me with an LOI in hand and a letter of intent, and they'll say, oh, we're looking to sell the business, or we're looking to acquire this business, and I'm often left dumbstruck, saying, well, this is literally the first I've heard about your aspirations for buying or selling a business, right? Some will call me after they've had lunch with a bunch of wirehouse brokers, and they say, we just had lunch with this team and we want to acquire them, but we have no idea how, right? Well, newsflash, that's not going to work, right? You're already behind the curve. So, the firms that are successful in the area of M&A, they've already prepared in advance, right? They already have a well-baked story, right? They've worked with folks like you to curate that story and tell the world their story. They've worked with folks like me to make sure that the economic models work and the contractual provisions are what they want to be. So if they're looking to sell, it's about aligning their systems and processes and tightening up their accounting practices years before they look to sell, because they want to optimize the price that someone is willing to bid on that business. If they're looking to buy, it's about actually having a brand. It's about having a purpose and resources to make them that kind of destination of choice. A firm that people want to join, and they model this out well in advance. And they've got to know that there's just too many sharks in the water to think you're going to succeed just with an idea alone, right? Just the fact that you had a great lunch and you're energized by the lunch doesn't mean that that's going to materialize into anything. So to address Liz's comment directly, those firms that are relying on M&A as a business strategy, they've got grand plans for your business, right? They either think they're going to sell more to your clients by way of product or additional services or wallet share, or they're going to sell your business to another investor at a premium, right? An aggregation strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the two primary investment theses at play right now, right? And so the question is, after working with your clients throughout your career, do you want to sell the trust and credibility that you've bought to a third party, right? And then do you want to work for them for the next 3 to 5 years to lend your credibility to them? And if the answer is yes, I don't pass any judgment, but most people just don't think through these things. They don't realize that what they're really selling is themselves to these firms, and they're putting their clients in a position where they are going to be confronted with these additional buying decisions. But listen, Suzanne, I'm a big believer. Even when you were running investment news, I would always chase to the bottom of the article and read the italicized print first, right? Who's writing the article? Who am I listening to?
Yeah.
Because anyone that's out there yelling about record valuations, but at the same time is ready to stroke a check for your business, they've got a credibility crisis, right? And so I think we've got to just watch where that message is coming from. But of course, it's no surprise that Liz is just spot on.
Yeah. So what, yeah, and I appreciate that. There was always, what was did they have an ulterior motive? And
Yeah,
that would be one of the things that we would look at when columns were submitted. What's the underlying motive for this person so desperately wanting to write their point of view on this?
sure.
Agreed. I think that's one of the things that everyone that's listening should take heed of when you're reading an article, especially since the guardrails, in my opinion, I'm not in media anymore, since the guardrails have come off where there's not nearly as much, I would say, I don't want to generalize, but there's not as much due diligence paid in the
Yeah,
majority of newsrooms, not all, but in the majority
yeah.
who's
So
submitting it,
start at the bottom,
why they're
right?
submitting it.
Start at the bottom, understand where someone, where their perspective is coming from. And if there's no information at the bottom, in that italicized text, go on LinkedIn, use these services, Google, right, to find out about where the message is coming from, right? Because you can get some great information, right, just by reading industry trade publications. But more and more, the reader is the curator, right? The reader is now left to be the editor and to determine what level of importance to give a piece, because it's not always blatantly labeled as sponsored content. There may be other business interests at play, to your point.
Yep, absolutely. So as we discussed, you work with a lot of RIA and wealth management firms. So what are the top trends that you believe will influence what the advisor of the future will look like in years to come? What will advisors and firms need to rethink to be best prepared to have a successful practice?
I think we're going to start to see at a macro level, I think we'll start to see a splintering of disciplines. I think you're going to have those that are really interested in running a business and those that are really interested in dispensing financial advice. For the majority of our respective careers, right, those two have been one and the same. So professional management, I think, is going to have a profound impact on this space. When I say profound, I don't necessarily mean a great impact on this space, right? The more we do to bring business into professional services, the greater our levels of concern should be about honoring the fiduciary obligation that advisors have to their clients, right? That whole trust and credibility we talked about earlier. So I think we'll see the business grappling with it. It's wonderful to have so much new capital and new interest in this space. So many new technology platforms coming online, but they all come at a cost, right? With all that increased interest, advisors have to be far more wary as to who they do business with and who they align with. And I think that there's no signs of this becoming simpler. This is going to, we're going to continue to compound the levels of complexity that advisors have to face, both within their own professional services and in running a business within this highly regulated space. And so, I think that professionals such as yourself and our firm, I think we're well positioned to be good stewards of the industry and really help firms get to places that they'd only imagined without having that objective advice and assistance.
Yeah, I couldn't, in fact, when you said professional management, I had a flashback to a workshop that I attended by Mark Tibersion probably 15 years ago, where it was like maybe the first time I'd ever heard that term in this industry, because again, it was much more about talking about providing financial advice to the end client. But I feel like there's been a lot of shift into this professional management topic. And many of the advisors that are interview on this podcast just happen to have either within the last few years or even more recently launched their own RIA. And one of the things that they're like, wow, there are a lot of things I didn't know, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of, I want to do well by my clients, but wow, I really am not great at some of this other stuff. And I think I need to find a partner who can help me do that. And so it's kind of interesting that had not been thought of before you decide to go out on your own and you realize there's actually, it's the old saying, working in the business versus on the business, right?
So and let me hang on that last point you just made, right? because we hear that a lot, right? This is a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be. And so advisors are often quick to do one of two things, right? They're either quick to call a service provider to say, "Hey, can you fix this one thing?" Right? It's the
Yep.
same way that people go to, their corner drugstore, right, and buy some
Get me out
medicine
of
that says,
pain.
yeah,
Give me
that
the
says going
shot.
to alleviate the pain instead of realizing what's going on. But the other is that they'll go to either a platform or they will go to an acquirer to say, "Get me out of this pain, right? Save me from, this position I'm in." And they do both of those things often prior to just going out and seeking objective advice. And it struck me a couple of years ago that, well, this is the Shark Tank effect, right? People will go on Shark Tank after trying to peddle a brand for 10 years, and they'll say, "Take 50% of my company for a song. Why do you want to sell at such a discount to a shark? Well, I need you to get me into a big box store," right? It doesn't occur to them that for far less money, but money out of their own pocket, of course, they can go out and hire, right, business development professionals. They can hire companies that can help them do that. But they just have reached the point where logic leaves the room very quickly and is replaced by anything to get me out of this pain. And really the best advisors are the ones that seek out that objective advice along the way. They've got a strong peer group of folks that they collaborate with, and they don't get to the point where it's just where the complexities overwhelm them.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's such a huge trend. And honestly, it's one that I don't think is been brought out as much as it should be. So thank you for mentioning that. And now on to our final question, which I ask everyone with the title and theme of the podcast focused on the future, keys to building a sustainable, profitable, impactful business in mind. Brian, what is your last line? What key takeaway do you want to leave with our audience?
That's
No
a
pressure.
tough one. Yeah, I
No
mean, there's a
pressure.
lot of pressure. I mean, I guess I guess it's that, hope is not a plan. It's, that it's no different for advisors and their clients that it is for the advisors themselves, right? Is that they sit down with clients. I remember this New Yorker cartoon, um, where a guy walks into his advisor's office and he says, I'm really, it's nice to meet you. I'm really excited. I'm retiring next week. Now's your chance to become a rock star, right? Like I haven't saved anything from retirement. Now's your chance to become a legend. And that hope is not a plan, right? We have to look beyond the social media posts that are out there. The best advisors, just like the very best investors that are out there, they look lucky, right? But behind all the extraordinary successes is someone that had a vision. They crafted a plan, they assembled a team, and they executed with precision and fortitude. And we see it time and time again. And we're really honored to be the firm that so many of those advisors go to. We don't sell them kind of the magic bullet solution of, if you just sign up for this, then you don't have to worry about any of this. But what we do is we ensure them that we're always going to proceed with nothing but their very best interests in mind and at heart, and be vested in their success. So I guess I'd leave with that. I mean, I think that's probably the best I got, Suzanne.
Yeah, first of all, I love it. Hope is not a plan. And I think that there are a lot of advisors that need to hear that. And I'll say too, just as a PSA, having worked with you and your firm on some of the behind the scenes things that go on, you really are worth your whatever you charge because there is a level of expertise. I want to say too, a technical expertise, but a creative expertise and a thoughtful expertise on saving saving a firm from themselves in a way that is just making sure that they're doing everything in a way that's going to set them up best for the future. And I've seen it firsthand. So it's been a real honor to have you on the podcast and to know you for so many years. I really appreciate you being my guest today, for sharing your story. I didn't know that. I love learning things about people. And I love that, just sharing what you believe will be some of the key factors that are really going to propel a firm to success and what may hold them back. I think you really gave some great advice here. I'm Suzanne Siracuse. Thanks for listening, and I hope this episode leaves you feeling even more excited to be focused on the future.